Today, I want to welcome you to our group, Veterans in Conversation, brought to you by the Power of Our Story and facilitated by Barry Zworestine, combat medic from the Rhodesian Bush War and currently a psychologist in Australia, and retired United States Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Scott Duncan. My name is Sarah Carell, founder of The Power of Our Story. We are a community where veterans, first responders, and all protectors can connect, share their experiences, and heal together. So today, I am thrilled to introduce Donn Bradley. He is a marriage and family therapist and what was a law enforcement officer. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Barry and Scott, for a great conversation.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. Don, welcome aboard. It's great to have you on here today. We're always amazed at the quality of guests that we get to come on here. That we all range in different ages and different life experiences. And so, we're always in the learning mode here, which is part of what we're going to do today, having you on. So again, thank you for being here. And I did go on and the LinkedIn, and I did look at your title that you have on LinkedIn. It's a licensed marriage and family therapist working with the begrudging. I like that. That's a good tag there for folks. So, and I also like the fact that you're unconventional, it seems, and so that's very intriguing because, as I'm sure we'll talk about, not everyone is necessarily readily available up here or even in here to want to talk about issues that can help them in terms of, what is counseling all about? What is it a waste of time? Those guys are all, crazy. But so, and I also noticed that you went to University of Oklahoma. I'm a big, yeah, I'm a big Texas fan, but I still love you.
Okay,
But
can I turn off just your picture? Is that a way to do that?
well, when you do, a big Longhorn
A
symbol
big hook
pops
of
up.
horns is gonna come up. Yeah,
It's up to
okay.
you.
All right. Oh, it's gonna be like that then. Okay, I see how it is.
But
Well,
in all
I,
seriousness, that's a great school, and you got a degree in a BA in counseling psychology, and then also you went to John F. Kennedy University and got another degree in counseling psychology. Was that a master's degree or?
that was the master's. Yeah, that was the
Okay,
process to get through the marriage and family therapy
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So those are your bona fides. I mean, I think that is important, right? Because some folks are interested in that, right? They're like, well, who are we talking to today? So,
Sure.
you're a big guy. Uh, that's obvious, right? But I really think that you come in from an angle that people who serve, whether they're veterans or police officers, are going to enjoy understanding that there's maybe a different way to process and a different way to look at things that aren't the traditional role. And I think that's going to open the door to some people to be curious and want to step forward. So now, Barry is a trained psychologist as well. So I'm going to probably be on the sidelines eating popcorn for a lot of this, but I'll jump in where I think I can make a point or where I can say something nice about Texas. I'll probably not do the latter, but anyhow. So with that, again, welcome aboard, Barry. You have anything to say before we get into the weeds here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, as many of you know, and this is what I loved about watching you in action, Don, was that, I have an uphill battle with my tribe because, and especially those that step into working with veterans, current serving, and law enforcers, because they just modality bound, evidence-based bound, which I find real triggers, but very little veteran informed. And the language of a bottom-up approach that really connects and they feel your presence and you've earned the right to be in their tribe rather than the other way around. So I really liked the gruffness and the honesty and the solidness of how you, certainly how I saw you in the podcast that I watched. And I think men and women who have served are really hungry for sitting opposite someone that intuitively and instinctively they know that they can trust. They know that this is somebody that steps in and has lived in their tribe and understands them and speaks the language of their tribe. So, you are a gift, because that is where the healing happens. It's not on the, as Shauna Springer would say, it's not on the certificates on the wall, or where you sit or they sit, or your evidence-based modality. It's about the quality of presence. So I really want to say thank you for being here today, because I think you've got a lot to offer and it'll resonate deeply with people that listen to this.
Well, my ears are ringing from all the what the imposter syndrome would tell me is praise that I don't deserve, but I'll do my best to kind of fight through that, right? Because I'm going to talk very confidently about this stuff. But one of the most things I'm confident about is that I am a caveman. I come from caveman stock. I am not a scientist. This stuff is not scientific. It's more about motivation and self-awareness, but it's also the reason I have to tell my part of that story is because of to basically, like you said, to prove to somebody why they should even be listening and and let them know that I know about the dark place that you've gone to, and I know about how cantankerous and anti-therapy. In fact, my hope is that the most anti-therapy people come in and listen to this because I want them to be able to take that thing that they wouldn't normally brag to their friends that they're doing, but maybe take into their dark hole, and they'll look at this video and they'll see that they're not alone. And that's that the main reason that I'm doing this is because frankly, I'm tired of seeing all the first responders and military folks taking their lives. And when I see that, my instant gut reaction is to say, please just talk to me and I can help you understand that. And through the experience that I've had, and I mean, like I said, that imposter syndrome is something fierce because I'm like, if it were up to me, I'd take that little Men in Black pen thing and I just zoop and wipe my face out of this because it's about the message and not the messenger, right? And that's the main thing is that, and that's so I kind of fight against that idea of like, who the hell do I think I am versus, and I will apologize. I have a tendency to kind of spray in some language in there every once in a while, and I'll apologize. I am actually very faith-based and Christian, but I'm also one foot on the dock is still in that kind of lifestyle, right? And after 9/11, I did all the anti-terrorism stuff, and so I did the advanced interview and interrogation and things like that, and so I've used it every day since being a therapist. And I just tell my clients, you can lie all you want, you're just not doing it to me. And most of the first responders are like, they're A to B. They're like, oh, you want to find out what's going on and get to the solution? Then watch out what you ask for, because that's the one of the hardest parts is honestly just getting in the door. Because I've had I'm a pretty good referee when it comes to the couples stuff. And a lot of the times I've seen that there's folks that they come in the door, but they don't allow themselves to start. They don't allow themselves to kind of get past that initial hurdle. And the things that I've sort of come together and created, I say created, I'm embarrassed to even say that, but it just happens to be a message that resonates to people who happen to have the same sort of caveman ilk that I have, right? And so what I would start out, I use a lot of analogy and metaphor. And the reason I do that is because I know that first responders and military folks, they automatically have those defenses up. But if I can tell you a story that gets you to get a picture inside your head, and then I can scribble a little something down next to that picture, then every time you think of that picture, you're going to think of that thing I scribbled down next to it, right? And it gets past all those defenses, all those arm's length defenses that we use. It goes all the way past that and kind of sinks in. So I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm trying to trick you. I'm trying to use tactical language, and I'm going to tell you right to your face, I am trying to trick you. I'm going to walk you into a trap because I want you to try to resist as much as you can. But put up your dukes, ready to fight, right? And what I would ask, one of the main questions I ask is always the first thing I ask is, do you have to be strong in order to be a first responder or to be in the military? The person, the Neanderthal is going to tell you, yeah, of course you got to be strong. Yeah, you got to be strong. So I'm going to use my tactical language to try to basically trick you into getting this thing that I want you to understand. And so I would ask, have you ever seen the world's strongest man competition, right? Where they're lifting the cars and the boulders and all this kind of stuff. Massive, massively strong human beings lifting these unbelievable amounts of weight for unbelievable amounts of time. When they finally put that weight down, does that mean that they're weak, or does it mean it was just time to put it down? Okay. I'll let you float in that one for a little bit. And then I'd ask you today on your person right now, do a quick check and see if you remember whenever you first started working out to be trained for whatever it was you were doing, militarily or first responder you trained, right? You remember how weak and inexperienced you were. And so I'd ask, do you have a weight on your person right now today from those original workouts? The answer is obviously no. And I say, why not? Because here's the thing. You told yourself back then, you know what? I'm going to put these weights down. I'm going to go home. I'm going to rest. I'm going to come back in and I'll try again tomorrow. In fact, the reason that you got as strong as you did is because you adopted that template, right? But become a first responder, get into the military, and basically you pick up the worst weights known to mankind. And for you, it's a Tuesday, right? You pick these things up and you're not allowed to put that down because it's what you signed up for. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so when you start using logic to kind of push against this structure that holds this stuff in place, the stigma, right? I'll be the first one to tell you, I was born in Oregon, raised in Oklahoma. Like I said, we went on a surprise vacation to Oklahoma, and I don't know if it was just a surprise to my dad, or if it was a surprise you live in Oklahoma now. It was one of those situations where we plopped into the buckle of the Bible Belt. Of course, everybody but us was going to hell, right? And so it's men don't cry, emotions are weakness. Anything that makes the unfortunate mistake of actually coming out just gets shamed right back into its container, right? So I grow up in that environment, and then ramble through out to California in '94 with no idea what it is that I wanted to do. I get there, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, what do I want to do? Well, I want to help people. Zero direction, but I noticed that the jobs I was taking, I was like, I don't want to die in a cubicle. My main thing is I just don't want to die in a cubicle. And so after an unsuccessful attempt to become a firefighter, to find that easier spot to become a good cook, I ended up landing in the sheriff's department, one of the local sheriff's department here, in the custodial setting for 2 years. And that's when some of the rose-colored glasses start to get knocked off a little bit, because you got to see a lot of a lot of my first, murder, forced sodomy, riot, stuff like that. And so I'm a bumpkin, right? I don't know anything from anything. And as I'm seeing this stuff, my brain's, human beings are not meant to see that stuff. We, first responders and military folks, just choose to step up to that line to basically stand there so that they take that punishment, so that other people behind them don't have to take that punishment. But it doesn't negate the fact that they're in fact human beings, right? And so the thing that I'm talking about specifically are the fact that you got to remember that you're a human being. That's the thing you are before you're anything else, right? And so as I go to a local muni department after the custodial setting, and that's when things really started getting interesting. That's when we started seeing. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, and I'm doing that not to sensationalize any of this stuff, but to basically make a point that I'm going to try to make later on down the road here. But right out of the gate in my FTO, the very first dead body that I had was somebody's grandma, right? Nothing spectacular in the grand scheme of things, but there was 4 things in the 90s that day: the temperature outside, age of the victim, the weight of the victim before she absorbed the entire contents of her bathtub, and the temperature her thermostat was turned up to, right? Reason I highlight this story is because I'm fresh out, seeing the situation. And of course the experience, every part of that experience was like a harpoon into my brain, right? The smell, the sights, the stuff like that. And then of course I had what I like to refer to as an oh shit moment. And that moment was obviously when they try to move her from the bathtub into the thing and everything comes out. I was in shock, right? But what was shock on the outside was actually professionalism, because I had somebody tell me, hey, you did a really good job. And I was like, I was frozen at what I was seeing. And that experience gets sort of burned in there like a tattoo on a sunburn, right? And so flash forward a couple years, it's another one of these calls. I'm sure everybody has heard these ones before, loved ones not answering the door, mail and stuff starting to pile up. We bust inside the house, open up the door, and there's piles of dog poop everywhere, like every couple of inches. And in one pile right by the door was a thumb. And I was like, and my brain was like looking at my partner going, is that what I think it is? Like my trying to like get that thing to click. You find what you inevitably find when that's the first thing that you see. And it was the totality of that experience that sort of burns into these events of all these, like I said, these oh shit moments. And these are the moments that are the logos for the trauma resume that you have, the picture of the thing that opens up this big, huge, I'll call them emotional flashbangs, right? And so what I was starting to see this stuff and not really knowing how to deal with it. And of course, there wasn't as many resources back where I was going, and so I'm getting swallowed up by this experience and not knowing how to deal with it. Start to develop a drinking problem, and I'm taking pills, and I'm smoking weed, and I'm doing all this stuff that's just really just sabotaging my life. And of course, I'm doing really bad and taking it out on my family who doesn't deserve the things that's happened to them. They can't handle the things that I'm going through. Right. And so when and I'm chewing myself up, and things were getting really, really dark. And I mean, it got to the point where I think honestly, the only reason that I didn't take my own life was because of that Southern Baptist upbringing where they said that if you do this, you're going to go to hell, right? And so it kind of scared me away from this idea, but I was really struggling with the idea of like, well, aren't I there already? Because I was really, really having a hard time with it, and it dragged me over the coals and was really struggling, right? Well, all that to say that getting through that and sort of going through that process, it forces you to basically do this introspection to kind of come out on the other side. And this story, these things that I'm going to tell you, they're going to seem super obvious, but I'm not talking to the smart part of your brain. I'm talking to the emotional part of your brain. And when you hear it, you're going to roll your eyes about how obvious it is. And I'm like, well, it's not that obvious. So hang with me and you'll get what I'm talking about. I'm talking to the person that doesn't want to be here, the person that's so steeped in that stigma that they don't want to move at all. And that's why I asked you about that World's Strongest Man competition, because you think you have to have strength, then being able to do this is strength and not weakness. And I take offense to anybody that suggests otherwise. In fact, like I said, I want the person that comes in here and says it's weakness. Okay, come and sit down and let's listen to what I'm about to talk about, right? Like I said, this imagery I'm going to give you is going to be super simple, but we'll start with like this. Take your hand, put your hand like this. Yeah. Okay. This is your brain right here. This is your brain. The cool thing is you get to take this memory device home with you. That's cool, right? This is your brain right here. So if this is your brain, then this is that first little peanut that you got whenever you were first born, right? Your survival mechanism, fight, flight, faint, or freeze. I can hear, even with your mutes on, I can hear your eyes popping from rolling back in your head, how obvious this is, right? Fight, flight, faint, or freeze. This thing is like a container, right? And whether you have good parents, bad parents, no parents, love and support, abuse and neglect, or you had multiple careers in military or first responder, it shapes how big this container is and how often you're allowed to pour it out, right? Well, I grew up in the Midwest, and don't cry, right? So we can only put stuff inside this container. Well, we get older, we develop our higher functions, logic, reasoning, stuff like that. But tucked way deep into the core of this thing is our survival mechanism. Have you ever gotten really mad, done something stupid, come back and went, oh man, I can't believe that I did that. What was I thinking? Of course you have, right? That's this portion of your brain casting judgment on this portion of your brain for doing the only thing it knows how to do, and that's react, right? Doesn't have eyeballs, doesn't have ears, doesn't ruminate, contemplate, or investigate. It just reacts. And so you got to realize that the reason that first responders and military train over and over and over again is because they need a survival script for whenever the shit goes down, right? Because that all your logic goes right out the door, and that in your training that kicks in that allows you to get through that situation. Well, you don't have one of those when you're having a conversation with your significant other right? And you say that you want to communicate, and this is a big one for me. It's like, okay, you want to communicate, perfect. As long as your brain stay here, you're good. As soon as one of you reaches here, you stop communicating. And this is basically just two rams on a hillside, right? But it's not like there's an alarm that goes off that says, hey, your wife is about to criticize you in 5, 4, like you put your dukes up ready to fight, right? There's not an alarm that goes off. And right. So the only job when this is on is to turn it off. It's not to work on your relationships or you look at your self-esteem or go back in time to think about the things you did, right? Because do you have a crystal ball? That means you can't go into the future, right? Okay. Do you have a time machine? No. That means you can't go back into the past and change anything that's happened to you, any mistake you made, other than the way that you think about it. And can you read minds? Answer to all those questions is no. This brain thinks it has all three of those things. And so the idea is your highest priority is recognizing when this is on and doing whatever you have to turn it off. Doing the breathing, the grounding exercises, the things that basically take your brain from the future and the past and bring it back into today, right? Have you ever seen those nature videos where the zebra's at the watering hole and the gator comes up to get him? In any of those nature videos, have you ever seen the zebra go, hey, let's talk about this as he's running away? No, that's because he's just de-assing the area, right? He's like, survival mode. Well, we get into that mode a lot more than we want to realize. And so when we think about that, my highest priority is to get somebody to kind of step outside themselves to recognize, am I here or am I here? Most of the time we're here and we're saying, the chicken little's, the sky is falling and this thing is all terrible and stuff like that. It's like, yeah. Well, you have to remember that our experience, all the stuff we've been through is like a very specific set of prescription glasses. And if you have flames painted on your glasses, then of course it's going to look like everything's on fire. And so I'm just saying, before you put out everybody else or put out your whole life or react according to the world being on fire, take your glasses off, right? And so being able to get somebody to recognize that when they're having that moment, right? I can't get them to recognize that when they're here. I just need to help them recognize that they're here so that we can get back to this spot and go, oh, okay, yeah, now I know. Okay, you're right. Yeah, now I know the truth. Now I'm not looking into the future to kind of freak out about all the terrible things that I've done or have happened or whatever. It's about not trying to lift it all at once. And so I will tell people, I'm like, you'll have this realization. You're going to hear this stuff. You're going to go, you know what? I never thought about it like that before. And then you're going to go outside into the real world and you're going to see it at play and you're going to go, oh shit. Oh boy, that I see it now. And it'll look like this big old Mount Everest pile of crap. And all I would say is, have you ever seen anybody jump to the top of Mount Everest? And no, of course not, right? You try to find a guide and you take small steps. Your brain will do that sometimes, but it will always do it from here because it'll have that realization, then the flashbang will go off and you'll drop into survival mode going, look at all this time that I've wasted or all the times where I beat myself up and stuff like that. And it is fairly simple. To me, it's fairly simple. And I say that, and I'm not trying to be patronizing. Just saying that if I can do it, then anybody can do it. Anybody can figure that situation out, right? But like I said, I use a lot of analogy and metaphor to try to get people to understand stuff. And so I don't know if anybody see that right there? Can tell me what that says? Somebody want to pop in and tell me what that says?
Yeah, it looks like 4 is greater than 2. Is that
mathematically it's true, right? I know it's simple. Watch out. Here comes that trap I told you about. And then I like Sarah said, she said that this is her mission. It's like, I agree with you. This is a mission. And because I'm going to trick you. Is like, if I told you that you would join a mission that would save lives, you do it, of course, right? Because you're all heroes in your own right. And so to say, hey, you'll join a mission, right? I'm like, I'm going to trick you into joining this mission that's actually going to help save your life, actually. Right. So I will get back to the 4 is greater than 2 thing. You get up to the cruising altitude of your life, change is really difficult, right? Because you're used to being in this lane. and you are that high professional. You've reached the pinnacle of everything you're trying to do, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, this bill is coming due. This emotional bill is coming due. Ooh, what am I going to do? Everybody expects me to show up here, and I need to be over here, right? Well, so let me jump into the next. I'll close with this part right here. Has anybody ever been to the county fair? Right? Show of hands who've been to a county fair. Funnel cakes, corn dogs, rides, games, stuff like that, right? Y'all ever seen down the midway that game where the horses are racing each other? Right? The water gun game where the horses are racing each other? Okay. Good. You stepped into my trap. Thank you for shaking your head, Rich. I appreciate that. You got to realize that there are 4 horses. That's the team that's responsible for pulling your life. I don't care how cantankerous you are. I don't care if you're a Navy SEAL. I don't care what it is. You have 4 horses, and that's the team that's responsible for pulling your life, right? There's the physical horse. That is the container that you came in, right? Whether you're tall or short or wide or thin, you're sick all the time, you're a gym bro. It's your physical identity and how important it is to you, right? It's a spectrum onto which everybody falls. Then there is your intellectual horse, right? That is book smart, street smart, somewhere in between, a little bit of both. Social horse, loner, cool kid in the group, somewhere in between, a little bit of both. Emotional horse. I'll get back to this one, okay? Now, like I said, I grew up in the Midwest. Men don't cry, emotions are weakness. We're going to basically tuck this one back here, and we're going to weld the gate shut. And when things get difficult, these are the coping mechanisms we're going to use to basically deal with it, right? So bang, the gun goes off. Those 3 try to figure out who we're going to be, right? Are we going to be the athlete? Are we going to be the brainiac? Are we going to be the social butterfly? Now, even women who are historically more in touch with their emotions than men are, to be labeled emotional is a bad thing, right? But for the men don't cry, emotions are weakness crowd, emotions are really bad, right? And so we're going to lock this gate here. These 3 become thoroughbreds, right? Because what happens whenever your physical mechanism kicks in? What do we do? How do we deal with this? We fight, we work overtime, we work out, all the while this little horse right here is bucking like crazy, okay? What do we do intellectually? Well, first responders and basically human beings as a whole are really good at this one. It's like they go into this chaotic situation. They're not bringing into an emotionally chaotic situation. They're not bringing an emotional tool because that's not what you can use to be able to handle that situation. They're bringing an intellectual tool. Follow me to safety. I know the way. Just, you know what I mean? You got to do the robot thing because you can't be emotional in those situations. In fact, you get so good at it that you end up bringing it home, of course, right? You go, well, shoot, it works at work in that chaos. It's bound to work at home. It's like, why doesn't it, right? Because they're not asking for you to solve the problem. They're asking for you to be a being that has this capacity, right? Socially, what do? It's choir practice. Right? I see that terrible call. I put that terrible weight on my shoulders. It's boiling a hole in my gut. I go to my partners where we're all sitting around, socking back booze. And if anything comes out, we can just go, that's the booze's fault. Right. But what happens? Right. I tell my partner, hey, that call was pretty messed up, huh? Because I don't want to let him know that something's wrong with me. I'm just going to tell him that pretty messed up. And he goes, that's nothing compared to this thing I saw last week or whatever. And then all of a sudden you just took that thing where you go, oh, well then shoot, that must mean that there's something wrong with me, right? It's not true. Just means that you're reacting normally the way a normal human being reacts whenever you're seeing these extraordinarily terrible things, right? But we stuff it in there. You get a cut on your arm, you feel pain. Pain tells your brain that something's wrong with your arm. Your arm didn't do anything wrong. It's just notifying you of a circumstance that needs to be addressed, right? You start shoving things into that container, just hand over fist and telling yourself you're not allowed to deal with it. And then that container gets full and starts spilling out on everybody else, including yourself. That's just the back part of your brain telling the front part of your brain that something is wrong, not something is wrong with you. And so this message is aimed towards the people that automatically believe that just so that they can get themselves inside the door. I'm telling this stuff because I've been in that dark spot, and I want there to be something in that dark spot when they get there. Even if they won't tell anybody else that's going on, I want to be able to listen to this and let you know I know why this is happening and I can help you, right? Because here's the thing. These three become thoroughbreds, right? But they're also bullies, because if this thing bucks or even like sneaks his head out or whatever, they're going to be like, get back in the gate. We got this. We can handle this. In fact, the intellectual one's the one that steps up and says, don't worry about this. I got this, right? Because it's the strong muscle that you use, right? But there are three things that have to happen in order for change to occur. And they're going to, like I said, they're going to sound super obvious to this one. But I'm not talking to this one. I'm talking to this one right here. Okay. You got to acknowledge that something's going on that doesn't work for you, right? If you've been depressed for 20 years, it's not who you are. You've been depressed for 20 years. It's time to get your head out of your hindquarters. Okay. Number two, you have to accept the level to which that thing is truly negatively affecting your life. I only drink a little bit. Yeah. Everybody else thinks you're an alcoholic. Until it changes in you, it ain't going to change. Okay. Third and most important, and this is the mission. Get ready. I'm going to have you sign the contract and say you're going to join this mission. You have to give this one permission to come out. He's not going to come out on its own. Nobody's going to drag you out and make you do this. You'd resent every person that ever tried to do it because of the way that it was drilled in there. But if you give this one permission to actually, because here's what's going to happen. It ain't going to be a thoroughbred that walks out of this gate. Right? That rusted, busted old gate, in front of which is a Mount Everest pile of shit that you've been holding on to, all the stuff you refuse to lean into. It didn't go away. It's waiting for you. And it's like a balloon payment. As somebody who's seen a fair amount of death, I can tell you that there's a payment coming at the end. And it's that big Mount Everest pile of shit in front of this little guy. But here's what's going to happen. This is not a thoroughbred that walks out of here. It's a doe-eyed baby walking on stilts, right? That's when I think about these first responders and military folks taking their lives. I imagine these three just trying like hell to make all the problems go away. And then that doe-eyed baby walking out, looking at that big pile of crap and going, I'd just be better off dead. And the simple fact is that's not true, right? Because you have got to give this one permission to come out. But you also have to give him permission to say, I'm not going to immediately be good at this. I'm not as good as these guys are at what they do. I'm scared of this. I don't want to do this. We prepared our whole entire life for that battle that came from the outside in, and now this one's coming from the inside out, and we're wondering why we don't have the tools for it. It's like, well, if you imagine this thing like a muscle, you can't atrophy that muscle and then all of a sudden go, okay, now lift the entire weight of the world, and then wonder why it's not there for you. It's like, you got to exercise that muscle, right? Because I told you, remember you said you went home, you put that weight down, you come back in, you try again tomorrow, right? When you start doing this and start lifting this stuff, it's going to feel really heavy, and it's wrapped in shame and guilt. Like if you do this, it means that there's something wrong with you, and there's not. It just means you're a normal human being reacting normally to the extraordinarily huge pile of shit that you placed on yourself because you volunteered to step up to that line as a human being so that other people didn't have to do that, right? Because here's the thing, that this doe-eyed baby is going to look at that stuff and go, I can't do this. And the answer to that question is be like, yeah, you're right. You can't do this by yourself, but you can do it taking small steps, and you are allowed to give yourself permission to find a guide, right? But if you never allow yourself to do that, intellectually, you'll get it. You'll be like, oh yeah, I know I need to take care of this stuff. I know I need to do it. But then this is the difference between understanding and acceptance. Right? Because here's the thing, that's everything that you're looking for, all that unease that's inside of you that you're trying to find a solution for is on the other side of that Mount Everest pile of shit. It's not as big a pile as you think it is. It just looks that way because it's looking through the eyes of a doe-eyed baby going, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? And when those emotions start coming out, they're going to try to all come out at once because they want to be immediately good at it. And you're not going to be. You just have to take small steps. Okay. Anyway, so this right here is kind of like this is meant to be that rubber band that is snapped on your wrist to remind you not to smoke that cigarette or whatever that thing is, right? It's just a memory device, right? Now I ask you, Do you have a crystal ball? Do you have a time machine? Can you read minds? On the inside of this bracelet are all the words that we use that suggest that we do. And it's a reminder that if we're using those words, then that might mean that this is on. And the only job when this is on is to turn it off, right? It's not to contemplate your future or the mistakes you've made, stuff like that. Because if you ain't got a time machine to go back and change it, the only thing you're gonna basically go back to either kick yourself in the ass or learn something about it. The lesson or the punishment, but not both. And the thing is, you get to choose. You get to give yourself permission to choose the lesson out of it, because you are the warden and the inmate in your own jail. And once you realize how long the sentence is, you paid enough for the thing that you've holding yourself in jail for. And that's the guilt reference and stuff like that, right? But here's the deal. Like I said, you get up to the cruising altitude of your life, change is really difficult. I hear that voice inside my head all the time. The one that told me that I'm a fraud for coming in here and talking. It's the one that tells me that there's something wrong with me, right? The one that we fought through that stigma, right? You're going to hear those voices coming from other people. You're going to hear that voice coming from you. And you're going to realize that I need to change from this lane that I'm in into this really uncomfortable, unfamiliar lane that I need to be in. And I'm not going to immediately be good at. And that's going to make me feel really, really bad. But you have to remember that you're actually doing it for yourself, not to anybody else. Just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. You got to realize it's going to take courage. It's going to be courageous, right? That thing you think is weakness, actually really courageous, because it's going to be require you to stand up on your own legs, right? You know, it doesn't mean you can't reach up and grab somebody to get to your feet. But once you're there, this is your walk. And so getting somebody to try to realize that when they're not immediately good at it is really difficult. But I found that being honest with them, telling them I can tell whenever you're lying, right? Even when you're lying to yourself, it kind of lets them know that they've got to step up to this process, because the only way they're going to change is by the strength of their own legs that might feel weak right now, and seems to resonate with folks because well, here I sit. That's a very truncated version of that situation. Anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Well, Don, that's a lot. That's a very, very condensed timeline. You put a lot of stuff in there. I I absolutely can connect with the visual part of how you describe things, the analogies and how you compare things there. I'm that way. So it makes it easier for me to follow for sure. So I'm sure that the most folks that are either first responders or military folks will connect in a big way with that. Then you bring out the four horsemen. That's a very interesting way of looking at all that as well. I've never thought of it in totality that way. And I think you were spot on when it comes to that guy that gets tucked away, right? That's a bit of a survival thing too, and at some point that you have to reconcile and you have to bring that out, because that's how you start to you start to find that forgiveness, and you start to understand how things really should work. And I think that's an amazing way of showing people the importance there. So I'm sure Barry is going to want to dive in a big way, because his mind is probably just zipping along at Mach speed here. But from a knuckle dragger, I'm kind of that way. My wife is very intelligent. She's an engineer by trade. Both my daughters graduated, and they've got STEM degrees, and they're doing great as adults. So they've got my stick-to-itness. They've got her smarts. So since I'm talking about smarts, I'm starting to get out of my league. So I'm going to pass it over to Barry and see what he has to say. Now, you're going to love Barry's voice. You've heard it already, but that makes everything sound that much better. So Barry, help me out here, man. What do you got?
Just my Rhodesian accent, my friend. Yeah, Don, what I love, man, is just it's like we've come from different worlds, but we carry something in the middle of us, and we arrive at the metaphors. And your metaphor, man, it just blows me away. I have my ones are often when the guys come in, I go, "Would you leave a man behind?" No, never. So how come you left yourself behind? Then we start to look at the SOPs to plan a rescue mission back. So you become your personal mission. Then we have to, then I use the whole thing about weapon clearing, weapon maintenance, pull through stoppages, ADs, runaway guns. So it's like I've got the military equivalent of this beautiful thing that you do with your hand. But what I love with what you do is the guys will carry away the metaphors and the strategies that they are born into in their process of service. But with this, they carry away their hand wherever they go. And this is a symbol, is it's like the transitional object, the place between where you've left and where you want to arrive and the craziness that can happen in between. And this is beautiful. I mean, if I had come across this years ago, I would have added that on to everything I did. So when they went away, they took their hand with them. And I really want to thank you for that because it is
It's all
just,
yours. That's meant to be.
man, well,
I
I,
think if
I'm
you have the capability, you have the responsibility. That's basically the way I look at this.
well, I
Despite
think
the
there is,
imposter syndrome, I think you have to.
yeah, and we've all got that imposter syndrome, and maybe that's something I think it's something everyone struggles with. You know, I've sat opposite the guys for 22 years and big buffy dudes, and they've got imposter syndrome, and I'm sitting with the same thing. Am I good enough to do here? Am I worth calling myself a combat veteran? I've been on marches in Australia and experienced exactly the same thing. Should I be here? I wasn't in cross-border pursuits. We were in four-man sticks in very dangerous territory, but I wasn't going into Mozambique. And it doesn't stop. I had a Navy SEAL tell me I have imposter syndrome. And then you've got the shame, then you've got the guilt, and then you've got the grief, all the things we don't like to talk about. And you've encapsulated that in the most beautiful this. It's just
I'll
extraordinary.
be the first one to tell you that I didn't do good enough already, looking back on this situation, that I didn't do this well enough, that I was like I'll
Mm,
criticize to myself everything that I did wrong
mm,
in that situation. But it takes a few swings of the axe to bring the tree down. So not all swings are perfect. And I what I realize is that they're going to take from this. Communications like playing catch with a baseball, right? There's the way it's thrown and the way it's caught. Just
correct.
basically, I can just throw it and then tell you, hey, when you're ready, just put your glove up and you'll get what I'm talking about. And when you do, it's going to be like, oh crap.
And I think the gift, you know, at a bigger level, beyond even the words, is that even when I hear you talking, if I was sitting opposite you as a veteran, I would feel you next to me. I wouldn't have to explain because I know you know. And often folks say to me, well, I was never in a war, I never served. And I go, well, that's it doesn't matter. But if you take time to learn the language and learn how to enter their world and demonstrate that, then you have a rite of passage into that. So anyone can do this. And I mean, I think the great thing is when we get together, you know, I've found my style over the years. I was like a psychodynamically and psychoanalytic Clinton Masters, but I knew nothing about veteran stuff. And for years, I just felt I was missing all the time. I wasn't hitting it. And it wasn't the modality or the neuroscience or brain-based. It was the fact that I wasn't able to find a language that connected with them. And, you know, when we combine our different styles of conversation, you know, the hand, the metaphors I use, we get so much better of being able to connect, but also we start to become better human beings in how we sit with these people. So I'll talk to you more about that
No- None
post
of this
today.
stuff works without the connection.
Yeah,
That's the key
completely.
thing. Is like you could have the best, you could be the best therapist in the world, but if you're not connecting with that person, it doesn't mean anything,
Well, you
right?
know,
Because you've got to be able to crack that barrier.
the classic story I had was a guy who came into my room, and I said to him, you know, I believe you were seeing somebody before, and he went, yep. And I said, so what happened? He said, I walked into the room, I sat down, clearly facing the doorway. The therapist said, you're in my chair, you need to move. He went, yeah, cool. And he walked out, never came back. That's your fundamental lack of attunement. And I think that connection and the attunement, and you're spot on, Don. If you don't have that one, it doesn't matter what modality you overlay it, it doesn't matter how many certificates you got on the wall, you are never going to get anywhere. There's no credibility. And universities do not teach attunement or connection. They don't.
Well, it's an intangible. Honestly, you
Yeah,
gotta. The space for talking with military folks and first responders is so small
yeah,
that they also don't realize that some of these folks are working in a deficit automatically because they've had a bad experience with a therapist before or whatever. And so they're already working in a deficit. And so being able to sort of find a space that used to be this big is now this big, you realize you may only have one chance. And that's what this is designed to basically be appeal to human beings. Doesn't matter who you are. It's meant to apply to that thing you are before you are a first responder or in the military. And right,
yeah.
making sure that you're building on that foundation.
And Don, I
Yeah,
guess my
guys, real
question,
quick.
yeah, carry on.
And let me jump in real quick, Barry. The connection part. So that it's a two-way street, right? The communication, the connection. So that should tell folks, especially the ones that are on the seat, or maybe they've gone once and it didn't work. Well, okay, you may have to find the second or third or maybe even fourth person, but there's someone out there in your capacity that's going to connect with you, and you'll start making strides, right? Just don't say, "Oh, I tried it once and it sucked." You're selling yourself short. You've got to be willing to stay in the fight and engage with the right guy or gal that's going to help you. That person's out there, and we're worth the effort, right? We should think of ourselves as that way. We're worth it to find that person that's going to help us.
Well, the sacrifice you've made up to that point, there's no part of that sacrifice that you signed up for. And I use that, I say that very sarcastically. No part of that included a crystal ball where you would have known, well, okay, I'm just going to have to pay this debt just for the rest of my life and just have to put up. No, no. What you got to do is you owe it to yourself and to your family, and you got to realize that you owe it to them to be able to get the prize at the end of your survival, right? Of your survival and your thriving and all that kind of stuff. And if you believe that you have to just carry this unbelievable weight forever and ever and ever, I'm like, no, because even the strongest people need a spotter, especially when they're going for their world record weight. It's like that makes sense. And those people, the people that spot you, are strong too. They may not have lifted the same weights you did, but they're going to make sure it doesn't crush you.
And Don, I guess my question for you is, you talked about the weight that folk carry, that we all carry in many ways, is that thing of guilt, shame, and imposter syndrome. And I think those are the uncomfortable ones that I didn't see that for a long time until I saw it in myself on a march in Sydney, and it hit me like a steam train. And as I became attuned to that, I started to see it in so many people that I was sitting with, and it's very uncomfortable, and it's often not a place you want to go. Can you talk to that and how that lives in the space between you and the folk you're sitting with?
Yes, I would say that if I told you to write your all of your stuff down and you wrote it down in the greatest of detail, and then I took that little Men in Black pen thing and I went zoop, and I said, okay, and I want you to read this with the eyeballs of the person that's been a helper your whole entire life, what would you do? You would give yourself all the help that you need. You would do everything you need to do. You'd say that person deserves to be able to they've seen all this stuff, they've done all this stuff, they've made all these sacrifices. Do they deserve to go and see somebody to talk about this and process and stuff? You'd be like, absolutely. But then if I went, oh, well, just so you know that all that stuff is yours, you'd be like, oh, oh, so it's a double standard then. Because you're basically, it's like, you want to use logic? Okay. Use logic to go, okay, I feel guilty. I feel ashamed. Why exactly? What's the thing that what did you do? You fought against this thing that you've been learning since this was all you had, that you're not allowed, this was a bad place to be. And so when you go, okay, well, that makes sense that when you get older, you're going to look back on that and go, where did that come from? How did that get drilled down in there? It's like it took a few years to get it drilled down in there. So it stands to reason that it might take a while to extract that mentality, but you have to be able to look at every one of those things. And every time this comes up, combat it with this to say, okay, yeah, I felt the feeling. I felt that guilt. I felt that shame. Okay, great. All right. Now what do? Well, we turn this off. All right. Does this brain still feel guilt and shame? No, it understands why we felt that feeling because we've learned this ever since we've been a kid. Okay, that makes sense, right? Because this is the one that basically knows that you're a good person, that you've been through a lot, that you get to process this stuff, and that you'd allow anybody else who's ever been through that stuff to process it too. So it's just basically that permission that I talk about is basically you giving yourself permission to be a human being just like everybody else. Even though you volunteered to stand that line, I get it. It doesn't exempt you from being a human being. It just means that you're going to have a lot more at the end to have to deal with when that tally finally comes due.
It's gold, my friend. Just absolutely beautiful. I love it. It touches the heart. Um, I'm just wondering, folk here, I think it's a great time to really, anybody got any questions, observations, and thoughts? I mean, Don, I want to just say thank you, my friend. It's
An honor to be here. It really
you,
is.
you know, I have seen so many people suffer. I have struggled for years to try and find ways to language getting in there, and it took me a long time. And I'm still always in a search for being better, to connect better. And you really bring a beautiful piece of the puzzle here that if we used just that and began with that, we'd be so much more effective in sitting opposite others as human beings with a language that resonates deeply. So I really want to thank you for what you said today.
I appreciate that. Well, the one thing you got to realize is that the very first language we learn is body language. You can only
Yeah,
see this far in front of your face, right? And
yeah.
so that you get that steeped into you pretty deep whenever you're sitting there staring at your caregiver and stuff like that. So when it starts to come out, it's going to come out from the very first way that you learned it, and you're afraid that somebody else is going to see it. And that's why I ask you, do you have a crystal ball? Do you have a time machine? Can you read minds? And what'll happen is if we go through this process and we start to feel this stuff, we're going to start looking at everybody else, looking back at us and judging us and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. First of all, take a big deep breath. Second of all, can you read minds? And of course you can't. And this brain knows that. And so if you're freaking out about the feelings you're having, it's because you're having them and you need to have them to be able that thing that you're going through, you don't say I'm going through, you say I'm going through this, not I'm going around this, right? There's a reason you need to go through it, right? Because when you saw that terrible thing and your brain went, I can't process this right now, you go back and look at it and you go, that was a terrible thing. That was an incredibly terrible thing, and it scared me, and I didn't know how to process it, and the death was terrible. It's like, yes, you still have to go through that. You can toss it back there if you want and think it's just going to go away, but it's not going to go away. You go through it, not around it.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, spot on. Thanks, mate. Um, anyone anybody
Rich,
got any
what you got for
thoughts?
me, buddy?
Ooh. Listening to you, Don, I was like sitting in a movie theater as you were talking, watching segments of my life go by as you're talking. Um, I always say no, nothing prepares you for the job. I mean, they train the hell out of you, they
Okay.
physically, right? And they don't tell you, you know, these things are going to happen. And for me, it was like every time I went to one of these situations, I had a kidnapping as a young cop, 6 months out of the academy. Had assassination attempt on my life in an undercover operation, and my brain was like a filing cabinet. So I took each one of those events and put it at the back of the file cabinet, back to the file cabinet. So when I retired, had all that time on my hands, that's when the demons came out. And I mean, they came out in full force, right? The nightmares uh, and all the medicating I was doing, the drinking. I had intimate relationship with Johnny Walker and Jack Daniels, and uh, I had a friend that had a liquor store, and if I knew I was going to be working past 10 o'clock at night, I would call him, and he would take the bottle, fifth, put it behind the garbage can for me, and I'd go pick it up on the way home and go home and drink it and pass out, right? And so everything you said really
Rich,
resonated.
do me a solid and take a big deep breath, brother. You smell anything inside that room? Do you have like a smell, a scent, or anything like that inside that room?
Yeah,
Yeah. What do you smell?
cinnamon.
You know your brain's got to be in that room in order to answer that question. It can't be in yesterday. It can't be in tomorrow. Right? You take that big deep breath. Brain's got to come back from the little trip we just took. Right?
Right.
That's the stuff that you're trying to deal with, man. It's a glimpse of that particular spot where you're like, okay, all right. So you've been through it. Good. You're doing something about it. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. I'm glad I was on this call today.
You're welcome. One at a time.
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick, Rich. Something you said that I think resonates with a lot of people, especially folks that did a career with the police force or as a firefighter, as a service member, is depending on how long you serve and what you do afterwards, you are in time with yourself because you have more time. And then what fills that void are those things that you put off for so many years because you were just busy. You were mission focused. I don't have time for that. I got to keep everything in this box here, all that stuff over there. It's been okay. It's always going to be okay. I don't want to, if I have time for that sometime, it ain't now. And then you fast forward and you're in that space where you do have time, and then those things start trying to crawl out of the box, and how do you deal with them? And I think everything that Don has been talking about really aligns so well with that. So yeah,
It
it's
would
kind
make
of
sense
a
that we're
dangerous spot to be in. What's that, Don?
well, you gotta realize that when you talk about that downtime and you try to it starts to come out of the box. The reason it's so intimidating is because I that's why I use the muscle analogy is like it's basically asking to be hoisted up with the muscle you don't feel real confident it's going to be able to hoist it up, right? And so when you sort of look at it like that, have you ever seen anybody go into a gym and lift all the weight in the first exercise, right? You space it out and you look at this. Now I'm going to tell this part. I typically have people do their ABCs. I'm not doing therapy today. This is just a glimpse into right. I'm trying to let people know that I will have them do their ABCs. And what that is just sort of this sort of cathartic exercise for doing kind of like your trauma resume, as it were, from the point where you first started uh, having your existence. You have these things that happen in column A, column B, column C. Column A is the event, whatever the name of the event is. Column B is, like I said, that oh shit moment. Great example of that. CHP officer pulls somebody off to the side of the road. He goes up, gets their information, comes back, sits in his car. He's sitting in his car. His door's open. He's got his foot outside the door, and he's just scribbling the ticket down. All of a sudden, he hears something, looks up in the rearview mirror, and realizes that the car doing about 90 miles an hour is going to completely obliterate him, and it does. It really messes him up. And what you got to realize is the oh shit moment is that moment when he looked into the rearview mirror and realized that that ego structure that he had, I will always be able to fight. I will always have a chance. It couldn't protect him in that moment. And so it caused fear where we weren't expecting to have fear, right? And so column B is the oh shit moment. That's the logo for that event. The thing, like when I told you about my things, it was the thumb and the dog poop and the lady falling apart and all the faces and the smells and everything like just smashed into this emotional flashbang. Like I said, the tattoo on the sunburn deal, right? But if you go and you did yours yourself, you'd find this exercise where you could take the stuff that's inside here, put it down on a piece of paper, and kind of like explore that a little bit more. Because column C is the value statement or unanswerable question. Why would God do this, right? Or the value statement. I wasn't fast enough. I couldn't do this, right? And what you'll notice is that you've forgotten about a lot of things that other people would be 100% horrors in other people's lives. And what you've also forgotten is you didn't ever actually said the word, whatever the value statement was. You just believed it, and that's the way you've always believed it because that thing burned in. It's like the barbs on a fish hook, right? The reason it hurts coming out is because it hurts twice coming out is because it hurt once going in, right? And so when you realize that you have these moments that you could sit down and sort of cathartically walk through, you're going to realize that there's a lot of I don't knows in there. And I don't know is the place that you start, not the place that you end, because you're trying to find out what a value did I assign myself? Because in that situation where the person died and I couldn't do anything, I assigned a value to myself because it was completely out of control, that it was completely out of control. There was nothing I could do. So the way I'm going to take control is by taking responsibility that's not mine, that nobody can contest me on. It's like, well, it was never yours to begin with. You're just having a hard time lifting this weight and figure, well, the way I lift the weight is go to my intellectual horse and say, take responsibility for this. You could have done something.
Oh, that's powerful. There, not to get into, things of my past, but that is so true. There are instances as a Marine, and then also as a brother-in-law, where you start searching your soul to think, well, why didn't I see that? Or, why wasn't I better at this? Because if I was, that may not have happened. And over time and everything you've talked to, you start to realize, hey, that was going to happen anyhow. It doesn't matter what you thought you could have done or should have done. And so that association of guilt is so strong. Those voices that you hear that are pointing at you, trying to tell you that, hey, man, this is your fault or whatever. Those are some heavy weights to lift. But everything that you just talked to is definitely a way to try to, refocus and look at the truth. And, there's light in truth. And that's what you're bringing with this. That's absolutely what I'm seeing.
Well, that's why I tell people, like, you're the inmate and the warden in your own jail. It's like, okay, if you feel guilty for something that didn't happen, let's prove it. Okay, what'd you do exactly that what and I'll walk you through this. What'd you do exactly to earn that guilt? Right. And once your logical brain, because it's here, walks through that process and goes, actually, maybe I didn't. Then why do I do that? What do I owe to that situation? What's the thing? Well, it's completely out of control. And I tried to take control by basically just taking responsibility that wasn't mine. It's like, okay, well, then does that mean that I get to let myself out of jail? Only with your permission.
All right. Awesome. Hey, Sarah, I see you've got your hand up there. What do you got?
Yeah, Donn, again, thank you so much. I am a human being, and that's what I share with you all. But I am someone that will never really know what it's like to be in war, be a first responder. But I can tell you, I think why I was so drawn to your story and what you've shared is because it connects the dots that I have connected hearing well over 1,000 stories. It's like I love how you pinpoint what can really help, the language that you use. I love that anti-therapy caveman. Like I just feel that a lot of the different angles of stories that I've heard, you really nail it in a way that can be heard. Your manner and the way that you're so potent in kind of nailing it in your analogies and stories. So I just want to first thank you for that, acknowledge that. Um, and I would love to have you highlight a little bit more the difference between understanding and acceptance.
Okay. It's the smart part of our brain that stays here can understand. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had people come in and say, I hear what you're saying, but, right? And but is on the inside of this bracelet too, right? Because it's a magic half sentence eraser. It's what it comes down to is there's a acceptance is that filament that goes all the way down to the central core of who we are in beliefs that even our logical brains say, oh, I know I shouldn't believe it, but I still do, or I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I still do. And helping somebody be able to step outside of their understanding and acceptance with the little four horse analogy is helping them realize that through the process they're going to see in somebody else, right? Let's say you've got there's the husband and there's the wife, right? Husband might have access to the emotional thing. She says, I have emotional needs. He's going to be like, well, I get it, but I don't have the weight to lift. I can't lift that thing that you're trying to get me to lift, but I don't realize it, right? I just see you coming at me because I'm always in self-defense mode. And it's like, no, we're trying to communicate, but what I'm trying to help people understand is that if you can recognize that in somebody else, you go, well, that must mean that applies to me too, because I am, in fact, a human being. Even though I'm the big strapping hero, I'm also subjected to this same type of thing. And if I can step outside of that and realize that, the thing that my significant other is asking for is in this category, then I can understand why maybe I'm not able to respond in the way that they want me to because I'm trying to I'm trying to use an intellectual tool for an emotional situation, right? Does that make sense?
And it seems like too, it can be hard when you're in that mode too, just the acceptance of um that okay, this is a weaker part of me right now that just has to be built up strong. I hear you intellectually, but the acceptance part of where am I at, like you were saying, I just think that's very clear, yet I think it's very profound.
Well, you got to realize it takes a few swings of the hammer to bring the nail flush with the wood, right? You're jamming it into here, and every once in a while this will come up and go, "Oh, it got me," or whatever. And we're trying to use this sort of post-incident analysis when this comes back online to build in grace. You're building in grace, like being kind to yourself and saying, and not automatically vilifying your emotions and other people's emotions just because you're uncomfortable, right? And sort of being able to analyze that because what you're doing is you're taking this timeline where something happens where this goes off and the doo-doo hits the fan, that when you bring the mainframe back online you go, what happened there, not what happened there, dummy. And sort of and being able to look at that in a way where you sneak it closer and closer to the spot, that way you're recognizing it before it happens rather than always waiting until after it happens and going, what did I do there, and doing that post-incident analysis. You're basically just trying to jam it closed until you don't need to use this to express your emotions anymore.
And if I can just end, thank you for that. I love how you said to grace. Like when you can see the situation with grace, then it seems like you do have your guard down where you can really start that acceptance. Like you're really being good to yourself. You're really being compassionate and understanding of what you've had to go through and how that it is okay that you have to work out that muscle, that emotional muscle. And but anyway, I just didn't want that to go by because I thought that was really powerful in this arena. So Donn, thanks again.
Of course, welcome.
Yeah,
Rita, you
Sarah,
have
when
something?
I was
Oh,
thinking I was thinking the same thing, when the word grace popped up, I thought that was excellent. Absolutely. Yeah.
well, if
Don,
you
did you want to
vilified
say
your
something? Cut
emotions
you off.
over a course of a lifetime, if you told yourself you're not allowed to feel this stuff or everything's associated with it, then it stands to reason that it's going to that when you have those emotions, there's going to be those automatic things kind of coming back to attack you like they're bad. And the grace is the one that says, no, they're not bad. They're just telling you that there's a cut on your arm that needs to be addressed, right? And so kind of like softening that moment makes those times that they do come out just sort of like, and this is the thing that it's notifying me of what's happening now, rather than, oh, you're so terrible, you've ruined your legacy because you actually have emotions. It's like, no, you fulfilling your humanity because you have emotions.
Amen. Hey, since we're talking about grace, we're going to go to Ulrike and see what she has to say.
Hi,
Welcome back.
Don. There's this uniqueness that I find between having first this job and then finding yourself on the other side. And I feel that gives you this beautiful connection in itself of like not being apart. There's not apartness from what they've experienced, what you've experienced, at least, in the grand scheme of it. By the way, I love this finger, which is one of my most favorite analogies that in Chinese medicine, the heart meridian goes from your baby finger through your hand to your heart, which stands for emotional openness, which is a nice connection to what you said. Um, and for me, what would be interesting, you said you have to give yourself permission. This finger is not gonna, whenever he sneaks out, it's gonna be like something banged over the head again. So because you've lived through it, do you have like really two, three examples where you say, hey, this is how I gave myself permission? So this emotional first kind of like a ball pit, like I put my feet in for the first time. Can you give some examples how that looked for you?
Well, the journey that, oh, sorry, somebody's trying to call me. The journey that in this spot was really bumpy because what I realized was that I couldn't fake going through the things that I went through, but I also met with a lot of resistance because there was, it's a fairly liberal profession with a person who represents law enforcement. Was I didn't realize at the time that I was kind of a bad guy, which I was like, that didn't make any sense to me. So it was that being able to sort of immerse myself in the most uncomfortable of circumstances, the exact antithesis of the stigma, the mentality, and stuff like that was very eye opening. And what I realized was it wasn't just me that was going to have to go through that. It was being able to create a space for the other person that's going to also have to do that and may not have. I've talked with a lot of people who have never spoken to therapists before, and I mean and we talk about the greatest honor ever, and so trying to relate to somebody that that part is going to be uncomfortable, that they're basically bucking this system and that it feels like this betrayal, this internal betrayal, and helping them sort of go, and you know what happens after you betray this, right? Because I even have to tell people about this rebound effect. I said, you're going to hear this stuff. You're going to think, okay, I never thought about it like that before. And then all of a sudden, if you wake up tomorrow or a couple of days from now and you're like more angry or more sad or whatever, and you start, it's basically that system coming in there to say, so you couldn't figure it out yourself, huh? You wimp or whatever, because you allowed that thing to come out. And like I said, that's those three bullies basically just going, get back in the gate. We had this before you let this weakling out. And I'm just saying it's just got to be, it's something that is that you're building into the very foundation of the very first time you're talking to somebody like that they have to understand that that's going to be there and that it's going to feel really super uncomfortable, and that's okay. That just means it works, not that you've done something wrong.
What would you think? Because, we're all learning, I would say, until the end of our days. And obviously, even though we are sitting in the seat of being supporters, I feel like it's highly important to remind people that it's these little steps that you talked about, right? These little snippets that we get. What are you still working on?
What am I still working on? The lifting other people's weights,
Okay.
right? Because I hear the stories that would make other therapists quit their jobs. In fact, because when you are that's the hardest part, is sort of is allowing myself to kind of not constantly, because I like using the analogies, because the one, it's like kind of like being right up at the edge of this raging river. I feel obligated to be at the edge of this raging river, but sometimes the river gets me too because of all the things that are kind of coming out. And when you reach in to fish somebody out of this dark flow, it's like I feel obligated to stay closer to that sometimes, and that makes self-care a challenge sometimes because I feel like, if I'm in too good a shape or too good a positivity or anything like that, then the person that needs me to be kind of like down at that level is gonna be like, I don't want to talk to that person. So sometimes I feel, and I realize it's kind of, there's a dysfunctional look at that, but that being that close doesn't mean that I have to be kind of like sucked up into it and a victim of it myself. And so I will oftentimes have these internal struggles with emotion about how much of somebody's stuff that I'm carrying. But I hear, above average level of suicidal stuff and terrible stories. And so it's like, that's why, I pray as much as I do, because I'm not lifting that weight alone. So.
Well, thank you. I would imagine that many feel that in different ways, right? That there's this weight that they're lifting in whatever form, and to move to a place that has a little bit more grace, as you guys said, and a little bit more self-love that needs to be just explored and practiced like everything else, right?
Well, we're not lifting their weight for them. That's the hard part. Was we feel like we want to take that off their shoulders, but it's the best analogy I've heard, and I'm going to butcher this one, is the one where the little girl and the dad are walking through the arboretum or whatever, and they see the cocoon on the flower, and the little girl's like, "What is that?" And dad says it's going to turn into a butterfly, and she's all excited, and she's like, "Can I take it home? Can I take it home?" The dad allows her to take it home and care for it, and she's watching this process as the cocoon gets bigger and bigger, and pretty soon she sees a little thing break through, and then it's two, and she sees this thing struggling. She feels for its struggle, so she very carefully kind of snips this thing open. It opens up, and the butterfly doesn't survive, and it's because they needed that struggle, right? That struggle that I talk about, that doe-eyed baby, they've got to feel that struggle so they can get some strength under their legs, right? And so we feel like, no, we want to take that off there so you don't struggle at all. It's like, no, I mean, part of the reason that muscle is going to grow is because of the weight that you're putting on it that feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's interesting, Don, because hanging out with Sarah and the families of the fallen, where they're really working with a lot of grief and struggle. It gave me a lot of time to reflect because I had something happen a couple of years ago, and I sat with a universe full of grief, which translated into anger, resentment, blame, the kind of "I'll drink the poison and you are going to die." And slowly, as I heard on the group the people share their stories, I found something starting to change, and that I realized that in my grief, which was my greatest struggle, was my best gift. And so it didn't become an enemy anymore. It was something that was forming a companionship walking with me. And then I realized that, because I love acronyms, and I had the first G as a gift, um, or gratitude. But then also hearing Sarah, you say grace. Grace really hit me. It's such a powerful thing, that concept and that energy of grace. And respect, integrity, empathy, blah, blah, blah. You could turn it into any acronym you want. But what began to happen was the situation hasn't changed, but my relationship with what I'm carrying is, I realize this is a extraordinary companion of mine, and that it speaks to me and it almost humanizes me. When I stop listening to it, there's situations I can come out the starting blocks pretty quickly. But it's been the most powerful thing, and really something triggered by watching extraordinary humans talk about the weight of their suffering. And I think a lot of what you do, and Sarah, that you brought up, and even Ulrika in our conversations, is how we greet these figures, these energies from our past, from our present, and learn that they are our greatest gifts and offer opportunities for such profound healing. And I think, Don, you really nail it, is that it's like a good patrol. The guys can walk with you, but you got to do the work. As an ultra marathon runner, it was like people can run next to me, but man, if I'm going to cross a line, I'm going to suffer, and I have to be able to do that suffering alone. It's that whole, the concept. There was a book called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. It's the most profound place where you are so alone, But in that aloneness and in all the voices, I call them the voices of your ancestors that come up and whisper in your ears, you're not good enough, you're never going to do this. In that place, you really discover who you are and the gifts of your heart and your compassion. So it's just, man, Don, I have to talk more to you. Well, not, imposter syndrome aside, let's just stay with the story that you offer people and the hand that you offer people. In there, it's pure gold, beautiful, because metaphors have such power to heal and making visible the invisible that's stuck and intertwined inside ourselves. It's just, the lucky rabbit's foot. It's there. Whenever you get lost, there's a light staring at you somewhere in your hand. And that's a gift. That's a gift to people that are lost. And all of us at some level inside ourselves are struggling with that sense of being lost.
Indeed.
So, man, brother, that was just, you touched me deeply. And I want to thank you for that.
I'll reach out anytime you want to talk.
Oh, no, I will. I've got an idea. Sarah knows what I'm up to with the project. It's very much a part of the power of our story. And I think, yeah, everybody here has contributed to that. But I'll talk to you more about that.
Of course.
It's my final gift.
My guerrilla therapy, I call it. It's kind of like a multiple plays on words is the on the hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, but with gorillas, obviously.
I love it,
But
man.
instead of doing this, they're doing this, which is what first responders and military have to do. They have to see it. They can't block their eyes to it. Instead of doing this, they do this. They have to hear it, right? Instead of doing this, they're doing this because they're not
Oh,
allowed to talk about it.
but talk about a body-based approach to inviting all the memories and the ancestors inside us to come out. Just the very act of, for a moment, just doing that, even that body movement, it does something. And, I really
That's
believe
the
in,
hope.
the body lives the score, as we know from Bessel. It keeps the score. And I love that body-based approach from the hand to that. And when we talk more to the bodies of people, and even when we talk more to our bodies, the healing we facilitate both in ourselves and the guys we sit with is profound. And I always remember the greatest gift I always had was I would sit opposite a big buffy special force dude. And I mean, for me sitting, I love these guys, and it was a real love. And it was there in the room. And at the end of it, they'd sit up, they'd stand up, like 6'4", and I'm only about 5'10", and they'd come and give me this massive hug, and we'd exchange, "I love you, brother. I love you, brother." And I realized in that moment, I knew why I was doing what I was doing, because just that experience of love for me as well as the person sitting with these people was the most profound and transformatory experience. And I often say that I think from sitting with these beautiful people for so many years, I certainly became a better human because in our conversations, I was self-reflecting. And Jesus Christ, it was so uncomfortable at times, hey? I could see myself in their journeys. And so they made visible so much more in the space between us, even though they were there for their story, I was changing and really becoming a better human being and becoming more understanding of what it was that was living within me. So, yeah, I think, when we can start to talk to educational institutions that turn out cerebrally present human beings, and I'll put the human being in an inverted comma, and more turn out embodied gorillas, I think we're on the way to healing. I love the gorilla concept, by the way. It's just, it's too cool.
Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah. So something you touched on very briefly, I caught it, and I'm sure others did too, is the thought of prayer, prayer being something essential that helps you uh, as you're being guided through life. That's something that's very important. So thanks for saying that. A lot of times folks are wondering about things like that. So just that little word meant a lot for me. So I appreciate
I
that.
listen this way by myself.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
So let me do this. We're about an hour and a half ish. I see Rich has his hand up, so I'm going to go to you in a second, Rich, and then anyone else has anything they want to say or add, question or comment, we'll do that, and then I'm going to pass over to Barry if you have any closing comments, Barry, and same with Don if you can tell us what you want to leave us with. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Rich real quick.
A couple of things I forgot to mention earlier is the camaraderie that I was experiencing on the job. You know, I guess somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought I could put that in a suitcase and take it with me, but you can't. So now I lost my tribe, right? And I got all this time on my hands, and that's when, like I said, the demons started to
Sure.
take advantage of me, or I allowed them to take advantage of me.
Thanks, brother. Yeah. And I know, Rich, you touch all of us deeply, brother. Just I've always said from the minute I met you that gentleness has always touched us deeply.
Thank you.
And I know we love you. And Don, I just want to thank you, man. You are the most lovable gorilla, a gruff, lovable gorilla. You have to sit tight. You have to sit for a while to see through the gruffness. But the gruffness of your gorilla and what that gorilla and the story and the symbolic metaphors that it's brought up. I just want to thank you because I know that you've added to my box of being a more present and a better human being when I do sit down with these beautiful warriors and protectors. And it is a gift, imposter syndrome aside. It is a gift. It doesn't matter. Even if the imposter brings the gift is the gift. It stays legitimate in its own right. And that is an extraordinary gift that was born from your fires and the fact that you took time to find these physical metaphors is just beautiful. And thank you, really.
That's
Yeah,
that's that's what it's there for, right? It's just I
yeah,
hate to see pain go to waste,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. And I suppose the thing is, you've got this, and so what's your gift? I'd love to take all of that and put your hand on a page and write this beautiful book that people could sit with and go, oh, yeah, my hand, it's right there in front of me. Now I can do it all. So I don't know. I don't know where you want to go with this great gift, but
Well, I'm gonna give out these for free, and then
yeah,
anybody wants to come and ask, they can. So
yeah, yeah. So thank you, and thank you for being here today.
thanks
I know
again.
it was
Thanks for
deep.
having
It
me.
was
I
it was
appreciate it.
deeply felt. Yeah, thank you. And I'll reach out on LinkedIn. I'll send you a message, and then we can also
Deal,
chat. Yeah, thank you,
deal.
Scott, brother.
Yeah, hey, what a
Anybody
great
else?
session.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, anyone else?
Yeah, Donna, sorry, I wanted to ask you, what would you want to leave behind if you took things that you want to leave resonating today for those that come back and listen to this and listen to it again? What is it that you want to leave behind?
Well, like I said, it's about the message, not the messenger, right? And so I think the thing that I would say is to whomever is out there that gets desperate, that gets all the way down in that dark spot, just listen to the message. And if you, and what you'll find is that just because you may not be able to handle or deal with what's happening right then at that particular point doesn't mean that that it just means you can't do it yet. And yet is that in this gorilla analogy or the Mount Everest pile of crap analogy, Mount Everest, there's the Yeti, and I use the Yeti as the thing. It's like you may not be able to do it now, but doesn't it just means you can't do it yet. And yet means is your brain basically telling you that I will that I'm able to do it, that I have to give myself permission to actually do it. And just because you're not good at it, that's the idea is like, of course you're not going to be good at it for something you've never tried before. And so when you get to that dark spot, just pull out to the side, push play on this video, listen to what I'm saying, and if when you get to the end of that thing and you want to talk with somebody, then just talk with me. I can help him.
I love it, man. You dropped the Yeti in the last minute. We could keep you here for another hour.
Yeah, that was the more to follow thing, right?
Well, that's the
Yeah,
stuff you
yeah,
got to pay
part
for,
two.
right? That's the stuff you got to pay for, I guess.
Yeah, conversation part two.
So hey,
So, it,
I
yes,
do
Scott,
have
go.
a question for you. Yeah, Don. So this will get out to everybody here once we post it on different platforms. I would imagine there'd be some folks that would be interested in maybe finding out more. Is there any way for somebody to connect with you, or would you rather have them come through the Power Story to get a hold of you? How would you
Anybody that
prefer?
wants to talk to me, then by all means reach out. I'll give this phone number, I'll give my LinkedIn or do whatever in the grand scheme of things. I'm not doing this for business. I don't, that's, that's not the reason that I wanted it. That's why I said I wanted to take my face out of it because it's not about me generating business. But I realize that, some people are going to be like, hey, I want to talk to this guy. It sounds like he knows like he going to relate to me. I understand that. And so anybody that wants to talk to me about that, I'll be more than happy to have a conversation with you. But like I said, I'm a pretty simple fella. So
Good
Well,
stuff.
simple in
Absolutely.
service, my friend, is where the beauty of your complexity and your gift lies. So don't change that because I agree with you. Everything we do is in service to our tribe. It's not about
agreed.
money. Spot on. When we go there, we need to stop. So thank you.
I agree.
Does anyone here have anything else to say before we close down? And Scott, you do beautiful closing downs. You got the finesse.
Sarah, do you have anything?
Just thank you. That's all.
You're
All I
welcome.
really appreciate it. Loved it. Great. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Don, like Yorkie said, we're always learning, right? If we're not learning, then why are we here? So if you're slowing, you're not growing. And I think this is absolutely a learning session for people, and that when they get to see this, that light's going to come on. Some folks may say, "Oh, cool, yeah, that makes sense." Others may just their head might explode, like, "Holy smokes, that's freaking awesome!" And that's where that grace and sweet spot is. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you're doing. So many times those of us that served, once we figured out, sometimes those folks put in a nice box and they move on. But it's amazing when folks can turn around and reach out their hand to help that guy or girl come up to something that's good, something you've learned. So the fact that you want to share that with folks says a lot about you as a person. So thank you for that. It's you're a big guy, and it's more than worth your weight in gold. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks,
But
Scott. I
thanks
appreciate
for your
that.
time. Yeah, absolutely. So everyone have a great weekend. This is a Friday, a Saturday for Barry over in Australia. So Barry, you have a great Saturday.
Thanks,
Rest of you
brother.
guys enjoy your, well, I guess we're getting close to being Saturday morning for Eureka, I guess at this point. It's kind of late. But God bless you guys. We'll see y'all next time. Have a great rest of the evening. Take care.
Thanks again, everybody. Wonderful
Thank
See
you.
you,
chat.
everybody.